Chapter 1. The Quiet Philosopher. Alex Carter had built his life around silence. Not the kind that comes from peace or meditation, but the kind that lingers after too many goodbyes. The kind that fills the spaces between words left unsaid. At 54, he was a philosophy professor at Greenridge College, a man known for his wit and his unshakable calm. Students loved him. They called him Dr. Carter the Cynic and hung on every sardonic comment he made about the human condition. He joked that life was just a long essay with no conclusion, and love was a typo that refused to be deleted. He was funny, in that dry, self-deprecating way that made people feel smart for laughing. What they didn't see was how much truth there was in his humor. On that particular October morning, the sky hung low over the campus like a sheet of dull metal. The air smelled faintly of rain and fallen leaves. Alex walked into his classroom with a mug of coffee in one hand and a stack of ungraded essays in the other. "Good morning, existentialists," he greeted, setting the papers down. "Today we tackle Descartes and his famous line, 'I think, therefore I am.' Personally, I've been trying that with my taxes, and so far, it's not working." Laughter rippled through the hall. He smiled faintly and began pacing, as he always did. Movement helped him think, or at least kept him from thinking too much. He talked about consciousness, doubt, identity, concepts that fascinated his students and tormented him. Because under every question of meaning was the same quiet ache. Who am I, if not the sum of what I've lost? When the lecture ended, he collected his papers, ignored the student who lingered with too many questions, and left the building. Outside, the wind tugged at the last golden leaves of autumn. The campus cafe was already buzzing, and through the window, he spotted the one person who managed to pierce his quiet world without permission, Cindy Wallace. She was waving him over, her bright scarf clashing with her hair, her smile a defiance against the gray day. He hesitated only a moment before pushing through the door. "You're late," she said, sliding a cup of coffee toward him as he sat. "I prefer to think of it as philosophically punctual," he replied. Cindy rolled her eyes, a move that had long since lost its sting. Translation: "You were grading papers again, weren't you?" "I was judging human potential," he said, deadpan. She laughed, a bright, unguarded sound that made the air feel warmer. They'd been friends for years, bonded by their shared love of words and caffeine. Cindy taught English literature, though her students described her as dangerously optimistic. She liked her metaphors alive and her endings happy, which meant they argued about nearly everything they wrote together. Their joint project, a book combining literature and philosophy, had started as a professional experiment and evolved into a quiet ritual. Twice a week, they met here, ordered the same drinks, and tried to make sense of love through the written word. "So," she said, tapping her laptop, "you still haven't written your section on the philosophy of romantic love." "I did," Alex said. "I just deleted it." "You deleted it?" "It was too optimistic. I didn't want to give readers false hope." Cindy leaned forward. "You really think love's that hopeless?" He shrugged. "Let's just say it's not a subject I teach from experience." She smiled, though her eyes softened with quiet curiosity. "You know, one day you'll surprise yourself, Alex Carter." He looked out the window at the rain starting to fall. "Let's hope not," he murmured. When he returned home that evening, the silence greeted him like an old friend. The house was small, neat, and utterly devoid of warmth. He microwaved a frozen dinner, poured another cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table under the weak yellow light. It was the same routine he'd followed for years. Predictable, safe, empty. A framed photo sat face down on the counter, a habit he'd never broken. He told himself it was just easier not to look. He took a sip of coffee and was about to settle into another long night of solitude when there was a knock at the door. 3 slow, hesitant knocks. He frowned, set down his mug, and crossed the room. When he opened the door, the world tilted. Standing on his porch was Loren, older, thinner, but unmistakable. His daughter. The same daughter he hadn't seen in 21 years. Her eyes were red, her voice small. "Hi, Dad." For a moment, Alex could only stare. Words formed and died in his throat. "I know it's been a long time," Loren said softly. "I didn't know where else to go." And then she stepped aside, revealing a little girl clinging to her coat, a child of maybe 5, holding a worn stuffed rabbit. "This is Abby," Loren said, her voice trembling. "Your granddaughter." The child peeked up at him, wide-eyed and silent. Alex's stomach turned. He felt the air leave his lungs, replaced by something sharp and aching. He opened his mouth, but all that came out was, "Why now?" Loren's lip quivered. "It's complicated. Please, we need somewhere to stay. Just for a while." He wanted to shut the door. Every instinct screamed for him to protect the fragile calm he'd built. But Abby was watching him. And in her eyes, he saw the faint echo of another little girl from decades ago. The one who used to sit on his shoulders at the park. The one who'd once called him her hero. His chest tightened. He stepped aside. "You can come in," he said quietly. "But just for a while." Loren nodded, relief breaking through her tears. Abby took her mother's hand, and together they crossed the threshold. As the door closed, Alex knew, without understanding how, that his silence had just come to an end. Chapter 2. The Return. The guest room hadn't been used in years. Alex stood in the doorway, watching as Loren set a small pink backpack on the bed and Abby clutched her stuffed rabbit to her chest, blinking at the unfamiliar room. "Thank you," Loren said quietly. "This is more than I deserve." Alex crossed his arms. It's a bed and a roof, not forgiveness. The words came out sharper than he meant. Loren nodded anyway, accepting them the way someone accepts bad weather, without complaint, because fighting would only make it worse. Abby peeked up at him. Do you have cereal? Her voice was small and hopeful. For some reason, it hit him harder than anything her mother could have said. He cleared his throat. There's some in the kitchen. Bottom cabinet. Abby nodded gravely and disappeared down the hall like a soldier on a mission. The sound of her footsteps echoed in the quiet house. Loren sat on the edge of the bed. She's a good kid. She didn't ask for any of this. Alex didn't answer. He stared at the half-empty dresser, the dust floating in the light. Neither did I. For a long time, neither spoke. The silence between them was heavy with years that couldn't be reclaimed. Finally, he said, you can stay a few weeks. Until you figure things out. Thank you, Loren whispered. He nodded once. There are rules. She almost smiled. Of course there were rules. Okay. First, I don't want drama. Second, no talking about the past. Third, he paused. Don't expect this to fix anything. Her shoulders sagged a little. I don't. He turned away before she could see the flicker of emotion he couldn't quite smother. Later that night, Alex sat at the kitchen table, pretending to read. The lamp cast a narrow circle of light, leaving the corners of the room in soft darkness. From down the hall came faint sounds, Loren moving around, Abby's voice drifting through the door as she whispered to her rabbit. He shut the book. The words weren't landing anywhere. His mind was too full of ghosts. He thought of Loren at 5, climbing onto his shoulders to watch fireworks. She'd covered his ears so he wouldn't be scared. She'd been that kind of child, bright, gentle, endlessly curious. He thought of the wedding, the moment she'd told him she wanted her stepfather to walk her down the aisle. The silence that followed had stretched like a lifetime. He'd left before the music even started. Now she was down the hall again, after 21 years. And there was a new child in her wake, another innocent pulling him toward a life he no longer trusted. He poured himself a small measure of whiskey and stared at the wall. The picture frame was still face down on the counter. He reached for it, then stopped halfway. Not tonight. He blew out a breath and went to bed. He woke early, as always. Habit, not need. By the time he made coffee, Abby was already at the table, swinging her legs and examining a spoon as if it held deep philosophical secrets. Good morning, he said. It came out rough and used. She grinned. You make loud coffee. He blinked. Excuse me. The machine. It goes rrrrrrrchhhhhh, she said, imitating the noise with great enthusiasm. He found himself smiling despite himself. That's the sound of civilization, kid. She wrinkled her nose. I like pancakes better. He hesitated. Pancakes. That was not in his skill set. Still, he found himself rummaging through cupboards until he located an old box of mix. By the time Loren appeared, bleary-eyed in her robe, the kitchen smelled faintly of smoke and defeat. Abby was clapping delightedly. I think they're supposed to look like that, Alex said, staring down at the blackened circles. They're very abstract, Loren offered. Artistic, he corrected. Abby giggled and reached for syrup. Grandpa's pancakes are crunchy. The word grandpa hit him square in the chest. He froze, the spatula halfway to the sink. Loren caught the look and started to say something, but he turned away. Eat before they turn to stone, he muttered. That afternoon, he escaped to the college, grateful for the distraction of work. He walked into his classroom to find his students already waiting, their laptops glowing like a sea of small, expectant faces. Today, he began, we discuss moral responsibility. Or, as I like to call it, everything that goes wrong when you try to help people. They laughed, and he felt that familiar flicker of ease return. Here, he could control the narrative. Here, the past didn't knock on his door. After class, he ran into Cindy in the faculty lounge. She was bent over a stack of essays, red pen flying, humming something tuneless under her breath. Hey, philosopher, she said without looking up. You look tired. Too many metaphysical crises. Something like that. She looked up then, really looked at him. You okay? He hesitated. Just had company last night. Her eyebrows lifted. Company? As in family. He said the word like it hurt. My daughter. She showed up after 21 years. The pen in Cindy's hand froze midair. Alex. He shook his head quickly. Don't. Please. I don't know what she wants yet. Cindy's voice softened. Maybe she just wants you. He gave a short, humorless laugh. No one ever just wants you. They want what they think you can give. Before she could reply, he was already heading for the door. That night, Loren and Abby watched an old movie in the living room. Alex lingered in the doorway, unseen, as Loren laughed softly at something on screen. Abby leaned against her shoulder, half asleep. It should have been comforting. It wasn't. It felt like a reminder of everything he'd lost, of how easily happiness had once lived under this same roof before it all slipped away. He turned and went back to his study, closing the door behind him. The house was full again, but for Alex Carter, it had never felt lonelier. Chapter 3, The Rules of Detachment. By the end of the week, Alex's house no longer felt like his own. It smelled faintly of shampoo and peanut butter sandwiches, and somewhere in the living room was a small plastic unicorn that whinnied every time someone stepped on it. He'd forgotten how much space other people took up. Loren tried to stay out of his way. She spent hours on her laptop at the kitchen table, whispering into her phone, chasing job leads. Every so often, she'd glance at him. as if checking whether she was still allowed to breathe the same air. He gave her a curt nod, which she seemed to take as permission. Abby, on the other hand, had no concept of boundaries. She treated the house like an unexplored kingdom. Within 3 days, she had discovered the squeaky floorboard in the hallway, the best hiding place under the stairs, and that Alex's bookshelf was exactly the right height for building blanket forts. The morning she tried to turn the couch cushions into a castle, Alex stepped out of his study, mug in hand, and froze. "What," he said carefully, "is this?" "Castle," Abby said proudly, her head popping out from a tunnel of blankets. "You're the dragon." He stared at her. "I don't do dragons." "Then you can be the grumpy wizard," she said, utterly unfazed. Loren rushed in, flustered. "Abby, honey, don't make a mess. Grandpa's trying to work." "He's not mad," Abby said with a smile. "He's smiling." Alex wasn't. At least, he didn't think he was, until he realized the corner of his mouth had betrayed him. "Wizard it is," he muttered, retreating to his office. At the college, Cindy noticed the change immediately. She caught him in the hallway, juggling a stack of papers and a travel mug. "You're late," she said, matching his stride. "I was busy being a dragon." Her eyes widened. "Excuse me." He sighed. "It's a long story involving couch cushions and peanut butter fingerprints." Cindy's grin widened. "So there are other living beings in your hermit cave." He shot her a look. "Don't start." But she was already laughing. "You're a terrible liar. You know that?" "What's going on?" He hesitated. She'd find out eventually. Everyone on campus did, one way or another. "My daughter and her kid are staying with me for a while." Cindy blinked. "Your daughter?" "The one you never." She stopped herself. "Wow, that's big." "It's temporary." "Still, that's wonderful, Alex." "Wonderful isn't the word I'd use." Cindy tilted her head. "Then what word would you use?" He thought about it. "Complicated." She smiled softly. "Most good things are." That night, Loren cooked dinner for the first time. The house filled with the smell of garlic and roasted vegetables. Alex stood at the doorway, watching her stir sauce with a focus that reminded him painfully of her mother. Same tilt of the head, same little hum under her breath. Abby sat on the counter, legs swinging, watching with fascination. When Loren caught Alex's gaze, she paused. "I hope you don't mind. I thought it'd be nice to have something homemade." He wanted to tell her he didn't mind, that the smell made the place feel alive again, but old habits won. "Just don't burn the pan." She nodded, accepting the deflection for what it was. At dinner, Abby told him about her day, about how she found a bird feather in the yard, and how the neighbor's cat tried to steal it. She talked and talked, until finally Loren said, "Sweetheart, let Grandpa eat." Abby frowned. "But he's listening." Alex looked up from his plate. She was right. He was. After they cleaned up, Loren lingered at the sink. "Dad," she said quietly, "thank you for letting us stay." He dried his hands. "I said a few weeks." "I know. I'm trying. I'll find work soon." "That's not what I meant." She turned. "Then what did you mean?" He sighed. "Just don't make it harder than it already is." Her voice dropped. "You think I wanted to come here? After everything?" He met her eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. "No," he said finally. "I think you ran out of options." The words landed heavy. She turned back to the sink, blinking fast. Abby's laughter drifted in from the living room. Alex closed his eyes, suddenly exhausted. Later, when the house had gone quiet, he stepped outside onto the porch. The air was cool, the night still. He looked up at the faint stars and thought of the life he'd built. One so perfectly protected that nothing could touch him. Until now. Through the window, he could see Loren tucking Abby into bed. The little girl reached up, whispering something that made her mother laugh. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like standing in the doorway of a house that used to be his, watching strangers live in it. He turned back to the night, wrapped his arms against the chill, and whispered to no one in particular, "I told you not to come back." But deep down, he knew he wasn't talking to her anymore. He was talking to himself. Chapter 4, Coffee, Secrets, and Suspicion. By the following week, Alex had perfected the art of pretending nothing had changed. He arrived at the college at 8 sharp, taught 2 classes, attended one interminable faculty meeting, and slipped out before anyone could invite him to happy hour. The mask fit perfectly again, almost. But Cindy noticed cracks. He'd missed 2 of their usual coffee sessions, citing grating emergencies. When she stopped by his office, he wasn't there. Once, she saw him in the parking lot loading a grocery bag full of children's cereal into the back of his car. She filed the image away, but said nothing. For now. It wasn't until Friday that everything came to a head. Cindy was in the faculty lounge, pouring herself burnt coffee, when 2 adjuncts from the sociology department started gossiping nearby. "Apparently he's got a kid living with him," one said, lowering her voice. "Carter? No way." "Yeah. Someone saw a little girl with him at the market. Adorable kid. I didn't even know he had family." "Neither did I. He's always been, you know." Cindy froze, cup halfway to her lips. She tried to brush it off, but the words stuck like burrs in her mind. He's got a kid living with him. By the time she reached Alex's office, her heart was pounding faster than she wanted to admit. He looked up from a stack of essays, startled. "Cindy, you could have told me," she said. He blinked. "Told you what?" "Don't play dumb. You have family staying with you. A daughter. A child." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "So? It's not exactly public interest news." Her voice rose. "We've been friends for years, Alex. We write a book together about love, for God's sake, and you never thought to mention that you have a family. It's not a family, he said, too quickly. It's logistics. Cindy stared at him. Logistics? You talk about a child like she's a tax deduction. He pinched the bridge of his nose. You don't understand. Then help me understand. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioner. Finally, he said, my daughter showed up out of nowhere. I haven't seen her in over 20 years. She has a kid. They needed a place to stay. I let them in. That's it. That's it. Yes. Cindy's eyes softened just a little. Why didn't you tell me? Because it's none of your concern. The words came out colder than he intended, but he didn't take them back. It was easier this way. Push before being pushed. Her jaw tightened. Right. Silly me, thinking friendship meant honesty. Cindy. She raised a hand, cutting him off. You know, I defended you when people said you were impossible. I told them you just needed time. But maybe you really don't let anyone in. He didn't answer. Couldn't. She turned, leaving the door half open behind her. The papers on his desk blurred in front of him. At home that evening, the tension hung thick in the air. Loren was in the kitchen, trying to fix the leaky faucet, sleeves rolled up, her hair falling loose. Abby was sprawled on the floor with crayons and paper, humming quietly. Alex dropped his bag by the door. Don't bother with that. I'll call someone. It's fine, Loren said without looking up. I used to fix these in our old place. He watched her work. She looked older than her years, worn thin by life. How was work? She asked. Uneventful. You look angry. He sighed. Just tired. She hesitated. Did something happen? He met her gaze. You ever try to live a life where nothing touches you? Then realize that's not living at all. Loren blinked. I'm not sure I follow. Neither am I, he said quietly, and walked away. Later, while Loren was putting Abby to bed, Alex sat alone at the kitchen table. His phone buzzed with a new message. Cindy, we need to talk. Not about the book. He stared at the screen for a long time before typing a reply. Then he deleted it. Instead, he poured himself another cup of coffee, the bitter kind that didn't need milk or sugar. The kitchen light flickered above him, and for once, he didn't bother fixing it. Through the thin walls, he could hear Abby's muffled voice. Mommy, is Grandpa sad? Loren's quiet reply drifted through the silence. Maybe, but he's trying. Alex closed his eyes. That was the thing about children, they saw right through you. Chapter 5. The Ghosts of Yesterday. Cindy didn't wait for him to reply to her message. By Sunday morning, she was at his front door, knocking with the determined rhythm of someone who refused to be ignored. Loren opened it, startled to see a woman standing there holding a paper bag and wearing an expression that could curdle milk. Hi, Cindy said briskly. I'm looking for Alex. Loren blinked. He's inside. Who should I say? I'm a friend, Cindy said, and brushed past her. Alex appeared at the end of the hall, barefoot, coffee mug in hand. His hair stuck up in tired angles. Cindy, he said flatly. You shouldn't be here. Clearly, she said. But since subtlety doesn't work with you, I thought I'd try blunt force. Loren hovered uncertainly in the background. Should I stay? Alex said. You might as well hear it too. Cindy set the paper bag on the table. Bagels, she said. Because apparently, I'm incapable of confronting people without food. He sighed, rubbing his eyes. What do you want? The truth, she said. Not the short, bitter version you toss around when someone gets too close. The whole story. For a long moment, Alex said nothing. The clock ticked, loud and patient. Then he sat down, as if gravity had decided for him. I was married once, he began. You knew that part. Janet. We met in college. She was smart, ambitious, beautiful in that way that makes you forget you don't believe in fairy tales. Cindy nodded slightly. Loren folded her arms, wary but listening. She got a job offer right out of school, Alex continued. I followed her. We built a life. Or what I thought was one. He smiled faintly. We had Loren 2 years later. She was the only thing that ever made sense. He stopped, eyes unfocused, as if the room had turned into something else. Flashback, 26 years earlier, the apartment had been small, bright, full of laughter. Janet was dancing barefoot in the kitchen, holding baby Loren in her arms while Alex tried to cook. He remembered the smell of burnt toast, the sound of his daughter's first giggle, the sunlight on Janet's hair. He'd thought it would last forever. But forever, he later learned, had an expiration date. It started with late nights at her new job, unexplained phone calls, a distance he couldn't name. Then came the confession, there was someone else. I didn't plan it, she'd said, tears in her eyes. It just happened. He remembered standing there, feeling the ground vanish. You're leaving? I have to. I'm sorry. He wasn't angry then, just hollow. He'd begged her to think of Loren. Janet promised they'd make it work, that he'd still see his daughter all the time. She lied. The next few years were a slow erasure. Fewer visits. Missed birthdays. Loren calling her stepfather dad before she was old enough to understand what that meant. And then, her wedding. He'd shown up early, nervous but proud, holding the small velvet box with the locket he'd saved for her. He'd imagined walking her down the aisle, imagined finally being seen again. Then she told him. She wanted her stepfather to do it. He's been there every day, she'd said. It feels right. He remembered the music starting, the guests turning to look, the ache rising in his throat. He'd walked out before the ceremony began. And that was the last time he saw her. Back in the present, Alex's voice was low. I walked away because I couldn't stand there and watch someone else take my place. I told myself it was the last time I'd care. Cindy sat very still, the bag of bagels untouched. Loren's eyes shone, but she didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't know, she whispered. I thought you just didn't want to come. He shook his head. I wanted to, but I couldn't survive it. The words seemed to hang between them like dust and sunlight. Cindy broke the silence first. So you built a wall and called it philosophy. He gave a faint smile. Something like that. Loren's voice trembled. Dad, why didn't you ever try to find me? He looked at her for a long time before answering. Because every time I thought about it, I heard you say you didn't want me. And I believed you. Loren pressed her hands to her face. Cindy reached out, touching Alex's arm gently. I'm sorry, Cindy said. For pushing. He exhaled, something between a laugh and a sigh. No, someone had to. When Cindy left later, she paused at the door. You know, she said softly. You talk about love like it's a wound. But sometimes it's just a scar. It doesn't have to hurt forever. He met her eyes. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, she said. It's human. Then she was gone, and the house felt both lighter and heavier all at once. Loren came to sit beside him at the table. Dad, she said quietly, can we try again? Not to forget, but maybe start somewhere new? He stared at his hands for a long time before answering. Maybe, he said, but not yet. It wasn't forgiveness. Not even close. But for the first time in years, it wasn't no. Chapter 6. Small Steps. Morning light crept across the kitchen floor, landing on a trail of cereal pieces Abby had left like breadcrumbs. Alex stood over them, coffee in hand, considering whether sweeping them up would make him complicit in domesticity. He sighed and fetched the broom. Grandpa, you're stepping on the stars. Abby shouted from behind him. He turned. She was holding a sheet of paper covered in crayon constellations. Those are stars. Uh-huh. And you're standing on Orion's elbow. He looked down at the cereal. Then I suppose he's had a rough night. Abby giggled, and the sound struck something tender and unfamiliar in his chest. He tried to ignore it, but it lingered. Later that afternoon, Loren hovered in the doorway to his study. Hey, she said quietly. I think you dropped this earlier. She held out a worn leather bookmark with his initials embossed on it. He took it, frowning. I didn't drop it. She smiled faintly. Then maybe it wanted to be found. He almost smiled back. Almost. Loren hesitated. I was thinking of taking Abby to the park tomorrow. There's a cafe nearby. Maybe you'd like to. No, he said automatically. Then, softer, not this time. She nodded, accepting it without protest. That, somehow, hurt worse than anger would have. Cindy hadn't called since the confrontation, but she hadn't disappeared either. On Monday, she slipped a note into his office mailbox. Coffee. No philosophy, just caffeine. He found himself at their usual cafe an hour later, wondering when he'd stop pretending he didn't care. Cindy was already there, laptop open, hair pulled into a loose bun. She looked up when he arrived and smiled cautiously. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said. I wasn't sure either. They sat in silence for a minute, the smell of roasted beans and conversation filling the space between them. Finally, she said, you look lighter. I swept up some stars this morning, he said dryly. Her brow furrowed. Is that a metaphor? No. Actual stars. Cereal-shaped ones. She laughed, a warm sound that pulled him a little further out of his shell. They worked on their joint writing project for a while, an ironic book of essays on human connection, written by two people who'd spent most of their lives avoiding it. Cindy leaned back, tapping her pen. You know, if you keep writing about love like it's an academic experiment, no one's going to buy this. That's fine. I'm not selling hope. She gave him a look. Then what are you selling? He thought about it. Survival, maybe. Try something a little less bleak. How about redemption? Too expensive, he said. She smiled. You're impossible. And yet you keep showing up. Someone has to. When he got home that evening, Loren and Abby were on the porch, watching the sunset. Abby was drawing in a notebook. Loren was staring at the sky like she was trying to memorize it. Abby waved. Grandpa, look. I drew you. He crouched beside her. The drawing was a stick figure with a coffee cup, surrounded by stars. That's very accurate, he said. Loren chuckled. She's been calling you Star Sweeper. Wonderful, he muttered. That'll look great on my resume. But later, when he went inside, he found the drawing tucked under his coffee mug. He didn't throw it away. That night, he called Cindy. I think I'm starting to remember what a home sounds like, he said quietly. She smiled through the phone. What does it sound like? He hesitated. Like laughter. And spilled cereal. That's not so bad. No, he said. It's not. For the first time in decades, Alex went to bed without the armor of solitude. The ache was still there, but it had changed, less like a wound, more like a scar learning how to bend. Chapter 7. The return of Janet. It happened on a Thursday, the kind of gray afternoon that made everything feel half-finished. Alex had just come home from campus, tired, still thinking about the stack of midterm essays on his desk, when he saw the silver car parked in his driveway. He knew that car. The doorbell rang once, sharp and insistent. Loren appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Are you expecting someone? He didn't answer. He just opened the door. Janet stood there, immaculate as always. Tom had been kind to her, or maybe she'd made a deal with it. The same honey blonde hair, the same poised smile that used to mean everything. Hello, Alex, she said. It's been a long time. He didn't move aside. Not long enough. Her smile faltered. That's not a very warm welcome. Did you come for warmth or for something else? Loren appeared behind him and froze. Mom. For a heartbeat, none of them breathed. Then Janet's expression softened into something like relief. Oh, sweetheart, look at you. Loren hesitated, then stepped forward, and the two women embraced awkwardly. Alex turned away, jaw tight. They sat around the kitchen table, Janet perfectly composed, Loren anxious, Alex radiating quiet hostility. Abby, sensing tension, retreated to her room with crayons and a wary glance at her mother. Janet folded her hands. I didn't come to start a fight. I heard you've been staying here, Loren, and I just wanted to make sure you were all right. I'm fine, Loren said, though her voice trembled. We're fine. Good, Janet said. I was worried. You never return my calls. Because every time you call, Loren said, it's to tell me what I'm doing wrong. Janet sighed. You know I only want what's best for you. Alex snorted softly. Janet shot him a glare. Do you mind? Not at all, he said. I've been waiting 20 years to see you explain what's best for everyone. She turned back to him, voice hardening. I see you haven't changed. And I see you have. Now you come with better excuses. Loren slammed her hand on the table. Stop it. Both of you. Silence. She looked at her mother. Why are you really here? Janet hesitated just long enough to give herself away. I wanted to talk. To Alex, actually. Loren's eyes narrowed. About what? Janet glanced at Alex. Could we speak privately? No, he said flatly. Whatever you have to say it here. Janet's composure cracked. Fine. I wanted to apologize. He stared at her. Now. Yes. I was wrong. About how things ended. About how I handled Loren. About everything. I thought I was doing what was right at the time. I thought. She trailed off. You thought you could trade up, he said. Her eyes flashed. That's not fair. It's accurate. Loren swallowed hard. Mom, is that true? Did you keep him away from me? Janet blinked. Loren, you were a child. You needed stability. That's not an answer. Your stepfather could give you things Alex couldn't. I wanted you to have the best. Loren's voice rose. He wasn't there when I had nightmares. He wasn't the one who taught me to ride a bike. You took that from me, and from him. Janet opened her mouth, but Loren's tears came faster than words. I spent years thinking Dad didn't care. That he just left. You let me believe that. Janet's voice cracked. I thought it was easier for you. Easier for you, maybe. Alex sat still, letting the truth unravel. He'd imagined this confrontation 1,000 times, but in reality it felt less like victory and more like an old scar being reopened. Janet rose, trembling. I didn't come here to be attacked. Then maybe you shouldn't have come at all, Alex said quietly. She turned toward the door. Loren stood, blocking her path. Mom, you always said the truth matters. So here's the truth. You lied to me. You broke us. And you don't get to waltz back in and pretend it didn't happen. Janet's eyes filled, but she said nothing. Goodbye, Mom, Loren whispered. Janet left without another word. The house felt strangely hollow afterward. Abby peeked from her doorway, uncertain. Loren sat at the table, face in her hands. Alex poured 2 cups of coffee and slid one toward her. She looked up, tear-streaked. I'm sorry. For what? For believing her. For letting so much time go by. He shook his head. We both did what we thought we had to. The rest, we'll figure out. Loren managed a small smile. You really think we can? I don't know, he said. But maybe it's time we try. Outside, the sky cleared, a pale stripe of blue breaking through the gray. That evening, Cindy called. You sound tired, she said. I am, Alex admitted. How bad was it? He hesitated. Necessary. Sometimes that's the same thing, she said gently. Come by tomorrow. We'll talk about something easy. Maybe even laugh. He smiled faintly. I don't remember how. I'll remind you, she said. When they hung up, he stood at the window, watching Loren read to Abby in the lamplight. The pain wasn't gone, but for once it felt like something living, not something dead. And for Alex Carter, that was enough. Chapter 8. Learning to breathe. The days that followed Janet's visit moved with a kind of fragile calm, like a house after an earthquake, cracks in the walls, but still standing. Loren went back to looking for work. Abby returned to drawing stars on every available surface, and Alex found himself doing something unfamiliar, not waiting for the next collapse. One morning, Loren was already at the stove when he came into the kitchen. Coffee, she asked. He blinked. You're offering me coffee? I'm trying to make up for 28 years of being a bad daughter, she said with a wry smile. He poured his own cup. You're going to need more beans. She laughed softly, and it didn't sound strained this time. Later that week, Abby followed Alex around the yard as he worked on the garden. What are you doing? She asked. Trying to convince this soil to like me. Does it? Not yet. She crouched beside him, sticking her fingers into the dirt. You have to be nice to it. Say please. He gave her a sideways glance. I didn't realize it spoke English. It does if you whisper, she said solemnly. Everything listens if you whisper. So he whispered. Just a little. Please. Abby grinned. See? Now it'll grow. He almost told her that life wasn't that simple. But then again, maybe it was. At the college, Cindy had reserved their usual corner at the cafe. When Alex arrived, she was already halfway through her first latte, tapping at her laptop. You look better, she said. Less haunted professor. More, mildly grumpy philosopher. Progress, he said. I'll take it. They talked about their book, though book was starting to feel like an excuse. It had become their ritual. Coffee, banter, silence that didn't need filling. When she teased him about using too many metaphors, he countered that she used too many adjectives. She leaned in. And yet you keep letting me edit your drafts. I'm not sure that's consent so much as resignation. Her smile was quick and genuine. You're impossible. Consistently. They laughed, and for the first time in years, Alex didn't feel like he was faking it. That evening, when he came home, Loren and Abby were sitting on the living room floor surrounded by colored pencils. Abby held up a new drawing. It was the three of them, stick figures again, but this time, all their hands were linked. Above them, in crooked letters, she'd written, home. Alex stared at it, throat tight. Loren smiled. She drew it herself. He cleared his throat. I can see that. Abby beamed. Do you like it, Grandpa? He looked down at her, and for once, the answer came easily. I love it. Later, after Abby had gone to bed, Loren lingered at the doorway to his study. Dad, she said quietly, thank you for giving us a chance. He closed his book. You're giving me one too. She nodded. I've been thinking, maybe you could come to Abby's school play next week. She's a star. He raised an eyebrow. Literally, Loren said with a grin. She says she's dedicating her performance to you. He felt something in his chest unclench. Then I guess I'll have to show up. That night, sitting on the porch, Alex looked up at the sky. It was clear, thousands of tiny points of light, quiet and patient. For most of his life, he'd thought of the stars as cold. Now, they looked like little reminders that even the smallest lights could last a very long time. He heard Cindy's words echo in his mind. It doesn't have to hurt forever. For the first time, he believed her. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight, for once, Alex Carter wasn't surviving. He was simply breathing. Chapter 9. The play. The auditorium smelled faintly of glue and optimism. Rows of paper stars hung from fishing line. A cardboard moon drooped from the ceiling. Parents filled the folding chairs, balancing phones and bouquets. Alex stood in the back, uneasy in his best jacket. He wasn't used to gatherings that required smiling on purpose. Loren sat beside him, nervously smoothing her skirt. Thank you for coming, she whispered. He adjusted his collar. I said I would. She smiled at the understatement. For her, it meant everything. When the lights dimmed, the curtain jerked open to reveal a sea of tinsel-covered children. Abby stood near the center, a five-pointed star costume swallowing her whole. At the first line of the play, she spotted him in the crowd and waved, breaking character entirely. A few parents chuckled. Alex raised a hand in return, the smallest motion, but Abby's grin widened until it nearly split her face. That was all it took. He didn't realize until that moment how much he'd missed being someone's reason to smile. During the intermission, Cindy appeared at the aisle, holding 2 cups of coffee from the school vending machine. You made it, she said softly. Wouldn't have missed it, he answered. She handed him one of the cups. Careful, it's the temperature of molten lava. Good. I like my coffee to suffer. They sat together as the next act began, shoulders almost touching. Abby flitted across the stage, reciting her lines about shining bright even when the sky is dark. Cindy whispered, she's wonderful. She's fearless, Alex said. His voice carried both pride and disbelief. Cindy looked at him sideways. You know, you glow a little when you talk about her. He gave a faint laugh. Occupational hazard of star sweeping. She smiled. It suits you. After the play, the children poured into the audience. Abby ran straight for him, nearly knocking the paper crown off her head. Grandpa, did you see me? He crouched down. I saw the brightest star in the sky. She squealed and threw her arms around his neck. Loren stood nearby, watching with tears she didn't bother to hide. Cindy took out her phone. Hold still, both of you. The flash caught Alex mid-smile, a rare, unguarded moment that would later sit framed on his desk. Outside the school, the night air was sharp and sweet with autumn. Loren hugged Abby close. Mommy's proud of you, honey. Abby looked up at Alex. Are you proud too? He touched her shoulder. More than you know. She nodded seriously. Good. Because I told my teacher you were my best friend. Something in him broke open quietly. He swallowed hard. I think that makes us even. After they dropped Loren and Abby at home, Cindy walked with him the last few steps to his porch. The streetlight painted everything in soft gold. She's changing you, she said. Maybe I was due for an update. Cindy smiled. So what now, Professor Carter? He looked out at the quiet neighborhood, the faint hum of life still running through it. Now? I think I try again. She hesitated, then reached out, her hand brushing his. You're allowed to. He didn't pull away. For a long moment, they just stood there, two people who'd spent too long hiding from the simple act of connection. When she finally turned to leave, she said, next time, bring stars instead of coffee. He watched her go, the night settling softly around him. Inside, on the refrigerator, Abby's picture of the three of them still hung in its crooked frame, home. For the first time in his life, the word didn't feel temporary. Chapter 10, Coffee and Second Chances. The winter came soft that year. Snow drifted across the streets like it was trying not to be noticed. At the college, students hurried to class wrapped in scarves, the campus bell ringing through the cold air. Alex's office window framed the scene like a painting. He was grading papers, but not really reading them. His thoughts kept circling back to the same two people, a woman who laughed with her whole face, and a 5-year-old who believed everything listened if you whispered. He smiled to himself. It felt new. That afternoon, Cindy appeared at his door, cheeks flushed from the cold. You busy? I'm pretending to be, he said, pushing aside a stack of essays. She stepped in, shaking the snow from her coat. Good. Then you won't mind me interrupting. She handed him a paper cup, his usual. Peace offering, she said. He took it. Did we have a war? I think we had several, she said with a small smile. But I'm hoping for a truce. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. Let's negotiate. She did. For a long moment, they just sat there in comfortable silence. Finally, she said, you know, when I first met you, I thought you were impossible. I was. You still are, she said lightly. But you're also different now. He raised an eyebrow. Older, you mean? She shook her head. Open. Like you finally remembered you have a heart and decided to use it. He laughed under his breath. Careful. I might start believing you. That's the idea, she said. That evening, when he got home, Loren and Abby were baking cookies. Flour dusted the counters, the floor, and half of Abby's hair. You're early, Loren said, surprised. I finished pretending to work. Abby ran to him, holding out a misshapen cookie shaped vaguely like a star. Try it, Grandpa. He bit into it. Tastes like ambition. Is that good? Very. Loren smiled. Cindy coming over later? He glanced at her. Maybe. Good, she said simply, and went back to her mixing bowl. Later, when the house was quiet and Abby was asleep, Cindy did come by. She brought a bottle of wine and 2 mismatched glasses. Thought we'd celebrate, she said. What are we celebrating? Whatever this is, she said, gesturing vaguely at him. The house, the night. You, me, the universe finally deciding to give you a break. He smiled. I'll drink to that. They sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the snow fall in the halo of the streetlight. Cindy looked up. You ever think about how strange it is? That pain and joy can sit right next to each other like this. Every day. And he exhaled, breath fogging in the air. And I think, maybe that's the point. You don't get one without the other. She leaned her head against his shoulder. You sound like a philosopher. I teach it, remember? Right? I keep forgetting you're actually qualified to be this complicated. He laughed quietly, and she reached for his hand. This time, he didn't hesitate. Inside, Loren peeked through the curtain, smiling. For the first time, she saw her father at peace. Not fixed, not flawless, but present. Abby's small voice came from behind her. Mommy, is Grandpa happy now? Loren looked at her daughter, then back at the porch. Yes, she said softly. He finally is. The next morning, Alex woke to sunlight. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen. Cindy must have started a pot while he slept. Loren was reading at the table. Abby sat on the floor with crayons. It was ordinary, simple, perfect. He stood there for a moment, memorizing it. A house once silent, now full of life. A heart once closed, now quietly beating. He smiled and poured himself a cup. When Cindy turned, he handed her one too. Coffee, he said. She grinned. Always. They clinked their mugs together in a small, private toast. To healing. To family. To second chances. Epilogue. Months later, their co-written book finally went to print. On the dedication page, in neat black type, it read, for those who stopped believing in love and learned, somehow, to whisper please again. Epilogue. The light that stayed, 10 years later. The same little house still stood at the end of Maple Street, its porch paint a bit more faded, its garden a bit wilder, but its laughter louder than ever. Abby was 15 now, taller, sharper, but with the same boundless energy. She sat on the porch steps, strumming a cheap guitar, humming a tune she claimed she'd written herself. It was off-key and completely perfect. Inside, Loren stood in the kitchen, frosting cupcakes with practiced hands. She owned a small bakery downtown now, Starry Bakes, named after the girl who once told her grandfather that everything listens if you whisper. Alex still taught philosophy at the college, though he'd recently told Cindy he was thinking of retiring before the students start calling me a fossil. She, in turn, had threatened to write a memoir titled Sleeping with Socrates just to keep him humble. They were married now, quietly, without spectacle. A backyard wedding, friends and family. Abby throwing petals in the wrong direction, Loren crying more than anyone else. It hadn't been a fairy tale. It had been something better, real. That evening, as the sun fell behind the trees, Alex stepped outside with 2 mugs of coffee. Cindy looked up from her notebook. Double shot of nostalgia? Extra strong, he said, handing her one. From the yard, Abby's voice rose with the last note of her song. Hey, Grandpa, what did you think? He smiled. Still the brightest star in the sky. She rolled her eyes. You say that every time. It's never stopped being true. When the air turned cool, Cindy leaned her head on his shoulder. Hard to believe how far we've come, she murmured. He looked out at the yard, the light fading, the sound of laughter and music. It doesn't feel like coming back, he said. It feels like finally arriving. Cindy smiled. You think you'll ever stop teaching? He sipped his coffee. Maybe, but I'll never stop learning. She nudged him. Philosopher's answer. The only kind I have. They watched the stars appear one by one. Quiet, patient, endless. He remembered Abby's words from years ago. Everything listens if you whisper. So he whispered, softly enough that only the night could hear, thank you. Inside, Loren placed a framed photo on the mantel. Her father, her daughter, and Cindy, all 3 laughing, eyes half closed, coffee mugs in hand. Beneath it, a small wooden plaque read, Coffee and Second Chances.